Hello everyone, this is Paul the Oak Knight coming to you after having taken off a few weeks to go ahead and play some games as well as to work in my shop where I created a brand new saw blade cabinet to hold all of my saw blades for my table saw as well as the various paraphernalia that usually ends up stacked on top of the table saw itself. So with all that done, I am back in action again with a first look at Into the Whirlpool, the very first game in a new system by none other than Herman Luttman, published by Blue Panther LLC. Now, at this point, I think Herman has got the record for the number of Civil War series that are simultaneously being created under his banner. By my count, he's got 4 series out there, all focused on various aspects of the American Civil War. And I don't think I've ever seen that before. So this new one, the Tattered Flag series, is a blend of traditional board gaming and miniatures gaming, without the miniatures, but with counters that take their place. I have seen this done before, generally not very successfully, but this one looks like it's got some promise. So let's go ahead and unbox this guy and take a look at it and talk about how it works just a bit. Before I begin, however, I just want to mention that this game was sent to me by Blue Panther LLC as a complimentary review copy. I actually didn't have to pay for this one. Now there's something new, actually the very first time I've ever gotten a freebie for being the Oak Knight. So is that cool or what? Anyway, I want to let you know that it came to me at no cost, and of course that will not influence anything that I say about the review, but I do believe in full disclosure, so there you go. Before I dive in too far, I just want to mention that I really like Herman's choice of battles for the first in this series. The Wheatfield is a very interesting and confusing part of the Battle of Gettysburg. First time I really was exposed to it is when I was at Gettysburg in 1987 for the 125th anniversary of the battle. And I remember walking the Wheatfield. There were markers in the Wheatfield from at least 3 different Union Corps, and I really think there might have been 4. So what were all these units from different corps doing in this small area that was the Wheatfield? Well, they were getting fed in piecemeal, here, a little there. Meade was grabbing them from wherever he could and throwing them in. And say, Into the Whirlpool is a very, very good name for this game. The cover art on the box is very attractive, a little unusual. It's got kind of a wraparound design with the, you can see the underlying box, the black box top and bottom on the short edges of the box, and it actually looks kind of nice. The artwork is great. Of course, Herman Luttman's name is posted prominently on the box, as well as the name of his new series and what the game is about. This game focuses on the action at the Wheatfield on the second day of the Battle of Gettysburg, July 2nd, 1863. And flipping to the back of the box, we see samples of the artwork for the map, as well as the various counters. And in this game, the infantry counters are rectangular, which in a tactically oriented game such as this, it's the right decision, it makes sense. As well as some cards that in fact are actually optional. You don't have to use the cards, and they're basically there's an optional rule. The map is 17 by 22, which is a half-size map. So this is not a huge game. And you can see from the playing time listed as 2 to 3 hours that it's not a game that's going to be taking you a huge amount of time. Now, I think if you were to play the largest scenario, which is the entire Wheatfield engagement, I think it might take a little bit longer, but I don't think it's going to take more than one sitting, as long as you, say, devote an entire afternoon, something like that. The box does not rate the game for ease of solitaire play. Having looked at the rules some, I would say I see nothing in there that would prevent solitaire play. So I think if you're like me and 90% of what you do is solitaire, I think you'll still be happy with this. And as far as complexity, I would rate this kind of middle-ish of the road. It's got about 35 pages of rules, but those rules are, as we'll get to them later, nicely printed, fairly large font, lots of examples. I think the 35 pages is over-representing the complexity. It's certainly not a highly complicated game to play. All right. Now, one of the coolest things that I see on the rear of the box is this entry right at the bottom of the left-hand side of the box art where it says, Made in the USA. Now, how about that? Now, if a small company like Blue Panther can go ahead and produce a quality game, printing it in the United States at a reasonable price, the retail price of this, at least what I saw on the web, was $60. Holy smokes, why can't other publishers do that? You know, we don't need to be hearing about things being delayed by Chinese New Year and boats getting tied up and dock strikes and all of that kind of junk when a quality game can be printed right here in the US of A. So kudos to Blue Panther for doing that. Taking a look at the rule book, as I mentioned, it's 35 pages of rules. The font used is actually really easy to read, so I appreciate that. And that tends to make the book a little bit thicker, but I wish more companies burnt some paper and did this because I'm not having any trouble whatsoever going through this rule book. Because of that, partially, it is fairly quick to read. It's not a real tough chore. It's well organized. It is got color. They've actually tinted the paper kind of a light brown, and many times when companies do that, they tend to put too much tint in and make it too dark. Well, that is not the case here. So I'm liking the rule book, how it's laid out and how it reads. The only negative I can say about the rule book is that they did not trim the right-hand side of the book. When you construct a rule book, the last step after you print it on your 11 by 17 paper, 4 pages per sheet, okay, two-sided, you stack them up, you get your long neck stapler, you staple the spine, you fold it over, and then what's going to happen is that the pages in the middle of the book are going to come out farther than the pages that are on the outside of the book. And to fix that, you have to go over to your chopper and trim off that right-hand side. That was not done here, and gives it a slightly unfinished look, but it also means that you can't put your thumb on the right-hand side of the page and thumb all the way to the end of the book. You kind of get hung up in the middle where the sheets are sticking out the farthest. And I guess that's a small flaw, and hopefully they will go ahead and take care of that with the next game that they come out with. And I can always take this to my chopper and trim the right-hand side, so it's no issue for me. Second, there is a scenario book included that contains the 6 scenarios of increasing time and unit count as you progress through the various scenarios. The game also includes scenario setup sheets that are actually quite large and printed on cardstock. Frankly, when I first saw them, I thought these were the game boards because they're really quite large for what they are, but really what they're doing is simply showing you in a graphic form where to set up what units. That's also included in text form in the scenario book, but you don't have to look at that if you can see all the units on these great big sheets, which is kind of cool. I like it. The scenario book, it introduces and shows you the setup and other special rules for the 6 scenarios, the first 5 of which zoom in on portions of the overall battle in the Wheatfield. Scenario 5 is the campaign, or if it's not really a campaign, but it's the entire grand battle scenario where you fight out the Wheatfield from beginning to end at the historic times. And finally, the 6th scenario is kind of an open format where you get to buy units and just have them come in from each side of the map and have it out. So it's not a historic scenario, it is just something that they included for fun. The actual game app is printed on cardstock. It's actually quite colorful, showing the Wheatfield in kind of an amber color, as well as other, I guess, planted fields that were in the area, the woods, the rivers, all of that. It's got elevation levels, and so there are rules covering the elevation and line of sight and all that in the rule book. In deciding this game, they had to decide how far they wanted to lean towards the miniature side versus how far they wanted to lean towards the board game side of things. And unlike some of the others I've seen that take that approach, this one really leaned more towards the board game side. So, for example, while there's no hexagons here, what they did is they printed octagon shapes forming a grid on the map, and those are used to regulate both facing and movement. So it's not like your typical miniatures game where you take out a tape measure and maybe you have a protractor that determines how far you can pivot your unit in any one turn. It's not like that at all. It's all regulated pretty much in a variation of board game style. The map itself is nicely printed, as I said. However, I would have thought that something like this would have been nice to have hard mounted. When I see companies like VUCA Simulations and some of the work they've done, I do like my hard mounted maps. And since the cost of the game was like $60, they could have increased it a little bit and put it on a hard mounted map. And I think I would have liked it even more. I don't mind paying for things when I'm getting something back for it. But as it is, I would put plexiglass on here to make all of the folds level out and not to put more wear on the map than I need to. And with that constraint, I think this map is going to support gameplay very well. 2.5 sheets of counters are included in the game. And let's see, by their count, 176 combat units, although they misspell it on the back of the box as combat units, but I can live with that. That's not a big deal. Well, as some square counters for various markers and things, and these look to be, I would say 9/16. They're bigger than half-inch counters. And I think the rectangular unit counters look to be half-inch by 1 inch. They're nicely printed. They are not gloss. They're not done with a gloss finish. They're done with kind of an eggshell. It's not matte either. It's kind of an eggshell finish. Same thing with everything else. There's nothing here that's really comes up glossy, which when I'm recording stuff is nice, although I will have to put plexi on. I wish they did hard mount the map, but hey, maybe next time, right? The counters for the units are individually mounted in the sprue, which is always a nice thing, so you're not going to have nubs. This looks like it might have been laser cut. I really don't see where nubs are going to happen on any of this stuff, so I'm thinking that this is going to punch up pretty darn clean. Everything's printed two sides, so the front of a counter is the good state of the counter, the back it's in the battle-worn condition, concept that Herman has used in other games as well. So during the course of combat, units can flip. There's no strength reduction markers. You can have a good Civil War battle system without having to mess with unit strength markers. That's a really good thing. Generally speaking, each regiment is going to have multiple counters. There might be some small ones that only have one, but most have like 3. A few have more than that. And so, for example, if you look at the counter, you're going to see something like 15 South Carolina printed on the bottom. But if you look up, you're going to see 4/4, 3/4, 2/4, 1/4. But those are numbering the counters. So you know that there's 4 counters in the 15 South Carolina when it's full strength, and you all see which counter is which part of the formation. The first counter in the series has the battle flags for the regiment, so you can see where the leadership of the regiment is. The printing on the counters is clear and crisp. I do see a hint of the counters losing alignment when they printed. So for example, if I look on the lower left-hand side of the counters here, I see the counter is completely covered with printing. But if I look over in the lower right, I see a little bit of white that's actually on the counter. So they missed just a little bit on the right-hand side. And I also see some of the square counters, they show the printing that should have been on the counter actually running off the counter onto the actual border, the sprue that they're mounted in. None of this affects gameplay. It is minor, and well, I still give them kudos for using an American printer, so I'm going to be forgiving as far as that goes. I don't think it should influence your decision to buy or not buy this game at all. The game includes 2 11x17 double-sided printed player aid sheets. So you have the combat sheets, the formation morale check tables, the unit morale test tables, and formation morale test tables. Well, there's something you don't see every day. So all the charts and things that you need, 2 copies of it, so each player will have their own. It looks like it's in a style similar to what Herman used in his earlier games. As I mentioned, there are 40 cards included in the game, and the purpose of these cards is to just mix things up a little bit to make the gameplay less predictable, giving short-term advantages to various commanders or to make historically based things happen that don't happen every turn. And they are entirely optional. You don't have to use them if you don't want to, which means probably the first time you play it or the first couple times you're probably not going to use them, and then you will introduce them later. So okay, at this point I think I've said about all I need to say as far as what you get in the box. What I like to do is to produce a second video that gets more into the actual gameplay as far as how the system works and go through that a little bit. So I think I've kind of done enough for today. If you've enjoyed this video, I would appreciate a thumbs up, a comment, and hey, shoot me a subscription. I would like that too. But for now, I think we've done enough. So this is Paul, the Oaken Knight, wishing you all a pleasant evening.